Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. He just published a book in 2023, and the title is Enigmatic North America Legends, Oddities, and Controversial History. His name is William Brown, and the Kindle came out in kind of summer, and then the paperback is out just within the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's really a great book. It's really well laid out, and there's a lot of questions. Like the United States is much more, or the North America is much more interesting. The history is very much more interesting than people might realize. There's a lot of different things going on. And I think this book shows that. And he's traveled around for the last 3 years taking picture and visiting these sites firsthand. So it's definitely a worthwhile venture to get this book and take a look at it, because there are some open questions, some parts of history that you may not find in your high school or college textbooks. But William Brown could talk more about that. So William Brown, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, William. I appreciate it. And so this summer, I actually released a paperback and a Kindle at the same time. They used to be linked at on the same page on Amazon. And what I did was that paperback with all those photos. I originally went with premium color and like premium pages, and it was a little expensive. So what I've done is I've made that down to standard color, and that's why it appears that it was just recently published. But that was actually a republication. So yeah,
Okay, my mistake.
no, it's okay. It's all right. Just giving you a little background on that. I did that just to make it more affordable. It was
Gotcha.
kind of it was kind of hard to keep that price down with the premium color. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Um,
Maybe the background is like, talk about your background, how you got interested in this kind of alternate history or kind of unfocused on history. I've covered it with other shows. We've talked about giants that are in the US and the Smithsonian covered up. So I've kind of covered some of the topics you cover in your book. But
yeah.
maybe you could just talk about your interest and your research that led up to this book, Enigmatic North America.
Well, I've always been a big history guy. I've taught history, teach economics, history, government. Um, ever since that's what I went to college for, was to be a teacher. And I always liked a good story too. And to me, history, it's hard to nail down the facts about anything past 100 years ago, right? It's a he said, she said after a while, or interpretation of primary sources. So for me, I was always willing to hear any story, even if I didn't necessarily believe it. I'm a big proponent in uh, free speech, allowing everyone to give their own perspective on it. Sometimes I get pushback saying, why are you even putting this stuff out there if you don't necessarily believe it? And to me, it's just, there's nothing wrong with being completely agnostic on a topic and saying, I don't know. Let's try to figure out why people even believe it in the first place. Let's try to figure out why people don't believe it. And so throughout this book and my YouTube series that I like to make videos, is why I got into this. And I just happened to also make a book. Really what I try to do is I try to just tell the story of the legend, the story of the oddities, the story of the controversy. I'm not necessarily proposing anything. There are a few chapters where I kind of convince myself that whatever the controversial history is the case. We can talk about some of those, and my bias does slip through on occasion. But I really try to fence it and just tell both sides of the story and make it fun. I like to take photographs, so there's a lot of photographs. I think there's over 240 photographs in this book that I've either taken myself or were public domain. And yeah, really, I love to travel. That's how I got into this. I love to travel. I spend my summers going around the American Southwest. I've done many Mississippi Mound Builder trips. And then just this last summer, I drove my car from Kansas to Oaxaca, Mexico, which is down like all the way down there near Chiapas and Guatemala. Did a whole road trip throughout there, seeing as many sites as I could. So I just wanted to start documenting this, and it's really a creative outlet for me. I like to tell the stories, I like to investigate the stories, and I really like the intrepid traveling as well. So that's kind of how I got started. I guess really more specifically was COVID happened, right? And they had the lockdowns, and I got a little, they told me 2 weeks and to stop the spread, and I the 2 weeks was up, and I said, "Nah, I'm gonna go." And so I bought a drone with my stimmy check, bought some, I bought Bitcoin, a little bit of Bitcoin, and the rest of it with a drone with my stimmy check. and I went and hit the American Southwest, which I thought was a pretty good place to be during a pandemic. I was just car camping out in the desert, flying my drone on BLM land. There's all kinds of archaeological sites where it's legal to fly a drone. You're not breaking any laws by doing so. And, petroglyphs out there that almost no one's seen. I just found myself walking like 8, 10, 12 miles a day through these canyons, just looking for stuff, finding it, not even knowing it was there a lot of the times. Realized I had a whole bunch of content after my Mississippi mound builders trip. Started looking into a lot of the stories I'm hearing along the way as I'm talking to locals. I'm talking to people in the area that are telling me about different things, and put together a little YouTube channel called Incredible History. I don't know why I picked the name Incredible History. I just ran with it, and here we are. I have over 80 videos out now, some of them short form, some of them long form, and each chapter in this book here is going to be, hopefully by the end of January or February, an episode on my YouTube channel. I think I'm on chapter 10 right now on my YouTube channel. This next week, I'll be releasing chapter 10 as an episode.
So you're doing the episodic follow of the book on your YouTube channel, right?
Correct.
Incredible History.
Correct. So if you don't want to buy the book, if you can't afford the book, no worries. Go binge watch that YouTube channel. I got a little playlist that's just called Enigmatic North America that has all those in a row there. Episode 1 through 9 at the moment, and 1 through 23 by the end of February, probably. No.
Right. So you're not just doing the Southwest or America. It also includes, your information includes what you found in Mexico too, right? Your
Yeah, I'd say half the book is Mexico and then a little bit of Guatemala. My most epic journey was down to Piedras Negras, Guatemala, which is the site that I don't know if your listeners are familiar with Edgar Casey.
Yes, maybe.
Edgar Casey, is called America's Sleeping Prophet. He's really known as the best psychic. If you believe it, for those who believe in psychic powers, he's considered the best psychic in modern times. And he had these really interesting readings. He used to do health readings, but somebody along the line started asking him questions about ancient America, the Maya, and then eventually even the legends of Atlantis. And there's a whole rabbit hole on his readings that points to refugees from Atlantis, the cataclysm Atlantis, eventually finding their way down in the Yucatan or Piedras Negras, Guatemala. And I went down there just for fun to film this little documentary. It's my most watched video. It's called Refugees from Atlantis. It got over 200,000 views just recently. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know why it popped off recently. I published it like a year and a half ago, and it got up to like 15,000 views. I was like, oh, cool. That's awesome. And then in September, just went boom. It has like 202,000 views right now. And this opening scene right here, this was fun. Maybe I could just take you through this.
Yeah, please do.
This is a drone shot at the Jacinto River. That's Mexico on the left side. On the right side is Guatemala right there.
Oh, wow. So you're right on the border.
Yeah, it's right on the border. Yaxchilan would be the most famous site that's nearby. That's probably a 2-hour boat ride upriver on the Mexican side of the border. But yeah, this is Piedras Negras, Guatemala. This is going to be a shot right here of the Acropolis, which is the largest structure at Piedras Negras. This is basically, it has been excavated, but it's not fully. I mean, you can't fully excavate a place like this.
It's huge, right? Like there's huge things under the forest of
gigantic.
Guatemala still. Yeah.
Here it is right here. So I got to climb this is just like the first level. It just keeps going. It's a whole temple complex. And let me show you this next part, because this part was really fun. This is like, I love intrepid travel, but this was actually really dangerous what happens here. It'll go back to keep going, go back to right where it was, basically where it was before you stopped.
Okay, so I shouldn't have even moved it.
Yeah. Okay, here, stay right there. So this is the opening scene of this. There were these rapids that we just mistimed, and you're going to see how much water we take on board right here. The driver was very nervous Okay, so here's the original, and then
It's never good when your driver's
boom.
more nervous than you.
Yeah, we pulled over and just started taking buckets of water out of the boat, trying to make sure it wasn't going to sink. And then a couple moments later, you'll see what we saw on the side of the bank here. We'd at least started making our way down river, but you'll see this in just a second. And sorry for the dead air, folks, but you're about to see a crocodile on the side of the river right
Oh
here.
wow.
Yeah,
Those are the dangerous ones, right? Those
yeah,
are
these are
dangerous.
actual crocodiles. These are
Yeah,
American
wow.
crocodiles right here.
Wow.
There it is. It's a big one. And yeah, that was wild. So it was a lot of
This
fun. It was that was
Indiana Jones, man. You're like in an Indiana Jones territory.
I don't know about that, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And whether or not you believe in the Edgar Casey story, I'm not sure what I believe about it, to be honest with you. But it was a lot of fun for me, and there's a lot of people that really, really get into that. I mean, they have a whole rabbit hole about the Lost Hall of Records being at Egypt under the Sphinx, Bimini Island under the water, and Piedras Negras, Guatemala, here in the Yucatan. And this used to be this is technically the Yucatan. It used to be considered so. So yeah, this is
Well, that's crazy. So, did Casey say that was he part of the Lost Tribes view of
he
kind of the foundation, kind of like the Mormons, right? The Mormons
yeah he
had some
did
lost tribe
he
element.
did he did tell a story. I don't know if he necessarily called them the lost tribes, but he called them. He basically is describing the migrating tribes from Israel and how they ended up becoming basically integrating with the cultures here in the Americas, whether it was the mound builder cultures or the Toltec or who it was. I can't exactly remember, but 100%, a lot of actually Mormons that I know personally are pretty into the KC readings. Um,
Interesting.
because there is some interesting. In fact, here's something for you. BYU is who excavated this site. Brigham Young University
Wow.
or and Pennsylvania. So the first one was Pennsylvania, but BYU came back in the 50s, I want to say, maybe 60s, and excavated Piedras Negras. Yep, there it is on the Usumanita River. This is the most remote Mayan ruin you could possibly go to. It took a Frontera Corozal is just down
Right
below right
there, yeah.
there.
Mhm.
I took a for me it was a 7.5 hour round trip boat ride because we got in that dodgy situation with the rapids. It's probably about 5 hours normally.
Wow.
I had to hire those drivers to do that.
They're all indigenous too, indigenous
Yes,
Indian guys or whatever you
yeah,
call
they
them.
speak Mayan Chol, which
Wow.
is a very distinct dialect in the Mayan language, and it was just incredible. One of the best travel stories I've ever had in my life, for sure. But yes, Edgar
Have
Casey.
you ever been to Merida? If you're ever in that area, Merida is amazing.
Yes, I
That's
have been
like
to Merida 6 years ago. It's been 6 years since I've been, but I really enjoyed it, and I actually did pass through 2 years ago on a little road trip, but I didn't stop. Yeah, that whole area in the Yucatan, now that they got LiDAR, which is
right.
basically ground penetrating radar that you can use with these drones, they're finding all kinds of stuff out there. They used to think that the largest pyramid, I just found this out the other day. I used to always say the largest pyramid in the world by volume was in Cholula, Mexico. It's this gigantic pyramid, not too far from Mexico City. And by volume, technically it was. Apparently, they just found one in Guatemala that's bigger.
Wow. Wow.
And by volume, so
So there's these huge ancient civilizations because I read Bernal Diaz's Conquest of New Spain, and
yeah,
he was talking to Moctezuma. And he says, "Yeah, there's a whole new ancient civilization that we don't even know about up there. That's
yeah,
from the 15th century,
right.
and that's huge. The Temple of the Sun. I think you have it in your book. Like
Yeah,
it's super impressive. Like it's amazing. So
unbelievable.
Northern America is crazy. You talk about the mound builders and Mississippi, like there's complexes all over the place. A lot of them were destroyed, which is really a shame. But
And a lot of them are very similar to the Mayan layouts, believe it or not. They're
interesting.
just made out of different material, right? They didn't have limestone up there in the mound builder areas. And part of Casey's readings is he says that the Mayans migrated, or a part of the Mayans migrated north and became the mound builders. I mean, it's a
Oh
whole
wow.
rabbit hole. I am not subscribed to that belief because I can't just say that that's true based on a psychic saying that, right? But there is a whole rabbit hole to go down there. Cahokia in Illinois and a whole bunch of the other
Right,
sites,
Cahokia.
you have some very similar plazas to some of the Mayan sites down there. Now, this gets us to like the whole, and this is a big theme in the book: diffusion versus isolationism, right? Are things happening because they're being passed down through travel, through trade, or is this just human nature? They built this because that's just what humans do, right? Do things happen in isolation, or do they happen with diffusion? The answer is probably both. But yeah,
Right, because we're taught in school, right, that nobody came to the New World, that it was a land bridge and they're isolated, and then something happened. The Europeans found the New World in the 15th century. But
yeah.
according to kind of the stuff you look at, there's much the old time kind of travelers are much more clever.
Oh, for sure. And then that, if you want to even go further down that rabbit hole, my second most watched video is they call it the cover up at Hueyatlaco in Mexico. And that one, for the longest time, they were saying 15,000 years is when people came to the Americas, and that would be Homo sapiens. And they've always said Neanderthals or any other type of hominid were never in the Americas. I don't know if that's necessarily true. Hueyatlaco is a site in Mexico where they found stone artifacts. No one doubts that they were artifacts. They were definitely artifacts. These were discovered by archaeologists that were working with the U.S. Geological Survey. They knew what they were doing. And when they dated that layer of ash, this was back in the 60s with they first did carbon dating, which gets maxed out at like 60,000 years or whatever. But then fission track and uranium series came, and they were finding minimum ages of 250,000 years in that ash. Some people say, oh, an animal can dig through layers. There's ways that those artifacts could have got there. But a lot of these geologists in this book I read called The First Americans really push back on that and say the geology was solid, the archaeology was solid, and this is what we found. Whole thing I call it a cover up because it was a cover up. It's a proven cover up. Men with guns from the Museum of
Oh wow.
Mexico showed up, banned excavation from the site, confiscated the artifacts. The artifacts are gone. No one knows where they're at.
Wow.
Luckily, there's casts of them, and the whole thing got memory hold. And so that one right there, and nearby are some supposed, I don't know if they are or not. I went and found them. Went and did some internet sleuthing to go find them. Some supposed footprints in a layer that is over 1 million years old. And so this is
How does can that be explicable? Like what? That's like a completely different world of human history and like
yes,
just regular history.
yeah.
So
This would be like if this was the case, this wouldn't be a Homo sapien. This would be like a Neanderthal, or so I don't even know. 1 million years. To be honest with you, I'm not sure what that would be. Um, but sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
well,
interrupt.
no, but it just I mean I'm not arguing with you. It just like the current understanding, and there's so much writing on these things, academic credibility, all this
And
other stuff where these cover-ups really do happen. Because I've studied
sorry,
the Kennewick Man
sorry to
and
interrupt you.
yeah, go
It's
ahead.
actually south of Puebla, Valladolid Lake. That little lake south of Puebla is
Oh,
where it
right
was.
here. This is
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was just saying that there's a lot of things like even the modern indigenous people wanted to cover up Kennewick Man because he had more European looking features. I'm not even saying he's European. It's just that it didn't fit into this concept like well, this is our land and we've had it for generations going back to time immemorial, right?
Yeah, and
So
I'm not as familiar with Kennewick Man. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about
it
it.
was a man was found on a riverbank. They thought they found a dead body, and it was called in the area kind of off of the Columbia River, if my memory serves me correct. And they gave him the name Kennewick Man, and somebody took his body and studied it. So this is Kennewick right here. So he got the name Kennewick. They thought it was current, but it wasn't. And they had timed. I guess he had the body had like an arrow or head and stuck in it, so they could time
Whoa.
and date it. But they pulled his. Let me see if I can pull a picture up. He didn't quite look like the local indigenous people, so they like covered it up, and people were angry, and it just caused this huge hubbub. Carbon date radio test 8,000 years ago.
Whoa.
Yeah, so but the picture of it, like they did they did like somebody did like a look. See, that's what he looked like. So he kind of almost looked like an Anu person or something like that, you know.
Right,
So
right.
the original things were different. There you see this is what blew people away is that he kind of almost looked like a character out of Lord of the Rings or something, but
Yeah.
he didn't look like the local indigenous. So there's a huge battle. Like it contradicted a lot of kind of what other people were thinking like at the time. So that's just another that could be another addition to your next edition of the book. But
Yeah, and another example of something that was really old was Calico, California, not too far where you're from, out in the desert. That's that's a big controversial site. They were finding artifacts that they think were around 100,000 years old. There's some dispute on that. There's reasons why they could have been in the layers that they were in. But when I actually went out there, I didn't include this in the book. I probably should have, but
so it's
I
the one by Barstow, Calico.
yeah, I think
Okay.
so, near Barstow. It's out in the desert,
Yeah,
and
that's definitely desert.
there's there's an old abandoned site out there that they even have a sign that talks about prehistoric man out in
Oh wow.
California. But there were some interesting dates that came out of there near San Diego recently. I wish I knew the guy's name so I could cite him, but you could look this up. They have found crushed bones of animals in a way that clearly someone was trying to extract the marrow, and that was found in a layer that was over 100,000 years old. Um,
Wow.
so there's
Something else. There's human history is a lot different than people might really kind of think. They're finding so much stuff these days. There's like this weird site in the middle of nowhere that nobody can really explain. You ever heard of it? This is kind of off the trail, but it's in Micronesia, and it's literally like some freaking I don't know if I can find it off the top of my head, but like they have almost like a temple structure, like a pyramidal structure.
wow.
Yeah,
Down
it's a
there's
trip.
where they found the Homo florensis as well. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but the little hobbit people.
Oh
Um,
wow,
yeah,
interesting.
you always heard these legends and lore about little people, and well, they actually did find uh, one that lived among Homo sapiens. I mean, this would have been, I think they died out within the last 100,000 years. Homo sapiens were definitely still alive. I can't remember where that was at, but it's somewhere down there in Malaysia or somewhere in that area.
Wild. Yeah, yeah. I mean, don't you think those myths, a lot of those myths maybe were like kept alive oral history, elves and different kind of racial classes. I mean, they're still kind of around today in different iterations, I suppose. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's all based on like the perspective they had then. Like, we watched Lord of the Rings and like think of it as fantasy, but like to them, maybe that is how they saw the world, actually. And I'm not saying, I know Lord of the Rings was obviously written by, was it C.S. Lewis? That's not
Tolkien,
Tolkien. Tolkien
J.R.R.
is
Tolkien.
friends with C.S. Lewis. Yeah, Tolkien.
Yeah, yeah.
And
The Green Dragon, right? They
right,
worked it out at the Green Dragon, or I think
but
that was it.
just some of these myths and legends, that are really interesting. It maybe really was their literal perspective, right? Their ethos that they had. So it's interesting.
Yeah, maybe that's why it resonates with people. Like it seems more, I don't know. It's like something out of myth. Like they took it all from European, like old myths and sagas and all that stuff. Yeah. So you've been through Mexico. You've been through like you've seen the Temple of the Sun too, outside of Mexico City too, right?
Yeah, I went over it on a hot air balloon actually.
Oh, nice,
Um,
nice.
yeah, the photos in my book are photos I took from the hot air balloon at sunrise in the morning, Temple of the
Wow,
Sun,
that's
and
cool.
then also I was very lucky, Pyramid of the Moon. Uh, this I had the perfect hot air balloon ride. Basically, with hot air balloons, you just are at the mercy of the wind that day. And this thing basically took us right over the Pyramid of the Sun. Is that where you're talking about, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's
And
what I think
then
so.
it kind of circled us back and took us right over the moon, which was really special. That was an incredible treat.
So the
I
plaza has the huge temple at one end, and then at the other end is that the Temple of the Moon?
Yeah, they're both two giant pyramids,
Yeah, right,
like
right.
two of the biggest in Mexico. Is that what you're talking about,
I think so.
Teotihuacan?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. It was
That was
incredible.
the one before the Aztecs. That was the
Yeah, Correct. The Aztec,
Gotcha.
it felt it was a sacred place because it was just this abandoned rubble, basically, but they knew something was there. So, yeah.
And so, I mean, there's all this hieroglyphics that can't be explained that throughout the U.S. that can't really be explained that they were done by Europeans. Like something else was going on, right? Like,
With like
I
what's
mean, you would like you to petroglyphs and like there's drawings of African animals, and
yeah,
they've discovered like I think they went through and did testing on some of these sarcophaguses in Egypt, and they had plants like cocaine or something that only could come from the New World,
yeah, the
right?
cocaine mummies. The
Yeah.
skeptics on that say that those mummies were tainted in the early 19th century, or sorry, the early 20th century, and because cocaine and tobacco were used as preservatives. I don't know about that. To me, that's like more of a stretch than they just were able to go to the Americas and get obtain this stuff right somehow.
Right, right. Some
So
form of trading, yeah, some
right,
form.
yeah. As for like different petroglyphs, I'm pretty agnostic on that. I really try to just look at both sides of the story on this. You know, 99% of the petroglyphs in North America are clearly done by Native Americans, correct?
Gotcha.
Every now and then you get these anomalous examples, and a lot of people say they're hoaxes, and they very well could be in many cases. We can talk about a few that I don't know if I'd call them a hoax, but they're just a misunderstanding. And then the other thing is these were maybe old world travelers that got here before Columbus. A good
Interesting.
example of that, let's do the hoax first, maybe. This might
Okay.
upset people, but I don't even know if
It
this is
won't
a
it
hoax.
wouldn't be the first time I
Yeah,
upset
it's
by
fine. It's like
news.
you read a book about controversial history, you're gonna make like both sides mad. Like
It doesn't matter.
talk about
Just
this. It's fun.
go for it.
But the that hiking to a very controversial petroglyph in New Mexico, that video that's at the top middle, right there, that is the Los Lunas Decalogue stone, which has like a combination of like Old Hebrew, some say Greek writing, some say Phoenician writing. I'm not really too familiar with Old World script, so I just kind of included all stories in the book. And this right here there's no question about it. It's definitely old world writing. It's just the question is, when was this created? And a lot of people say, "Oh, that looks new." Well, to be fair, this was scrubbed and chalked soon after it was discovered.
Hmm.
Um, and you can kind of fast forward if you want to find where I'm like right up on it. But this was supposedly discovered in 1930 for the first time, like it reported. It had been known about supposedly since the 1800s. A guy named Professor Frank Hibbins discovered it. Some people think that maybe he or one of his students did this as a prank. Some people think that this is from the lost tribes of Israel. I have a theory that isn't necessarily my original theory. I've seen this, you know, talked about a lot online before, but I like this one. Crypto Spanish Jews during the 1600s were in New Mexico escaping the Inquisition in Spain. And I think it's possible, especially if you hear about the 1800s, this being known about in the 1800s. I think it's very possible that someone who knew Hebrew or Old Hebrew was there in the 1600s, 1700s during that Inquisition. The Inquisition lasted a long time, and there's an entire history of the crypto Spanish Jews. What that word means with crypto is they were practicing their faith in secret. They had to. The
Right.
Inquisition,
They
you're
were forced to I think it was Isabella and what was the other guy? They forced like
Ferdinand.
conversion, yeah.
I think Ferdinand.
Ferdinand Isabella. Yeah. So
Yeah,
right around the time of Columbus, right? I
yeah,
think
and it lasted a long time. Like it didn't just go away after one generation. It lasted a very long time, and you were safer in the United States, but you still kept it on the down low for a long time if you were Jewish or basically not Catholic, right? In some of these areas that were controlled by Spain. So yeah, me and my brother went out there and saw it, and I thought I loved seeing it, and I'm very open minded. But to me, I just feel like this one just seemed a little too perfect. Where
Right.
the Bat Creek Stone is another example where you find this Hebrew writing on a stone that was underneath, basically near a mound in Tennessee, if I remember right. And it said, "For the Judeans." Very simple. It wasn't elaborate. It said, "For the Judeans." And the reason I think this one's more likely to be real, the Bat Creek Stone, is they originally thought it was Cherokee. No one proclaimed that this was Hebrew. It wasn't until like 100 years later, when everyone was dead, anyone involved was dead, that they turned it upside down and they're like, "Oh no, this is Hebrew." All they did was turn the artifact upside down and realized it said, "For the Judeans" in Hebrew. And no one disputes that it is Hebrew. The question is, when was it made?
Right.
There were two people that found in a Masonic reference book very similar writings that someone thinks that maybe someone copied in the 1800s, but it's not exact. There's like a word divider and some differences that are on the actual artifact. And Scott Wolter from America Unearthed, everybody's probably, maybe not everybody, but he's got a really famous show on the History Channel. He's done an entire investigation on the Bat Creek Stone. He has a whole episode on that. Another one that I think is more likely to be real, that a lot of people don't think is real, is the Hebner runestone in Oklahoma, which is a Viking runestone. And yeah, I think that's right there. That
Just right
book
now,
right
yeah.
there, yeah. So the most known runestone is the one out in Kensington, up in Minnesota, and it's this elaborate runestone with this entire message. To me, I've there's an archaeologist named, I think, Dr. Jackson Crawford, and he points out that there are trouble with the pentatic numerals. Basically, they were trying to write in like Arab numeral form, but it should have been in pentatic numeral form. Like the number 14 wouldn't be 1 4; it would be just 14 in pentatic numerals. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, but that made sense to me. And so I'm kind of fence sitter on the Kensington one up in Minnesota, but this one in Oklahoma, it's really simple. A lot of people think it's fake because, well, how are the Vikings getting all the way down to southeast Oklahoma? Well, I can tell you how they'd do it. They'd go up through the Gulf of Mexico, up the Mississippi, and through the Arkansas River, or the Canadian River. Those rivers were really big back then, still are. The Arkansas River is really big. This lady named Gloria Farley here first saw it in the early 1900s with family friends while they were hiking, and they always called it Indian rock. They just figured Native Americans carved it. It wasn't until later in her life that she realized these were actually Scandinavian runes.
Wow, it's
And
amazing.
yeah, and this is likely, some people think it's a grave marker. Some people think that it's actually just a territory marker. It's been translated as Gloam's Valley. And so, this one, there was an actual professor named Dr. Henrik Williams from Uppsala University in Sweden, and he's investigated all the American runes, and he thinks all of them are fake, except for on this one, he says the jury's out. He just
Hmm.
couldn't imagine anyone back in the 1800s, or really even the 1900s, knowing this form of runic language. Runic language, just like the English language, evolves over time. This would have been from like the 13th century,
Hmm.
maybe 11th, between the
So
11th.
that's the height of the Viking kind of conquest and everything too.
Right, right. And so,
And yeah, we know the Vikings that were very skilled with their boats, and they would travel all the way to kind of Constantinople. They get on the Volga and go down to the Black Sea and actually reinforce Constantinople, and there are
yeah,
all kinds of Varangian things. So it's not out of the realm of possibility if they really were dedicated to
yeah,
getting around them.
there's runes in Egypt, right? Or is it, maybe it's down in Turkey. You were talking about
Hmm.
Constant. Maybe it's down
Yeah,
there
yeah,
somewhere in the Middle East. They found runes, and even archaeologists say, "Oh yeah, these are authentic. They made it all the way there. Why not
yeah.
America?"
No, it's wild.
Right?
Did so the one that's in New Mexico that didn't look like Hebrew. Was it some form of Hebrew or was what like I don't
The
understand that.
stories are Old Hebrew,
Oh, okay.
Phoenician, and Greek.
Interesting.
which are all, and even like there's even one translation that includes a little bit of like whatever was the language or the written script in Russia at the time. So
Wow.
I don't know on this one. I don't know on that one. I just know those are the three I've heard: Old Hebrew, Phoenician, and Greek. Like kind of a mixture of them almost.
But that was done in the 15th, 16th century. There's actually kind of an interesting story in New Mexico because you talk about people fleeing there, but it became a repository of the old Spanish that came from the New World. That sounds like in the modern Spanish, it sounds like what we would think Elizabethan English was.
Oh,
And they
interesting.
still speak it. So in this whole thing, this old rancher families, the real Spanish, when it
Yeah,
was the Spanish Empire, they speak this thing that would be the equivalent of like, "Thus saith, Joeth, toeth, goeth," this kind of thing. And people, when Spaniards heard it, they thought they were joking, like they were talking in some kind of ancient Spanish, but that's just a remnant of the language that they had at that time. So maybe they wrote something on this,
that's
some rancher or
incredible.
something. Yeah,
They
nuts.
were also what's the like the San Luis Valley and New Mexico, southern Colorado, there's so much incredible history there. Chimayo, New Mexico, the Spanish history in that area is just amazing. But what was the like branch off the Catholic Church that was into like self-flagellate, like they would do self-punishment? The pin starts with a P,
Jesuits, I don't know.
but they're
Opus
still
Dei.
there. They're
Oh
still
wow, so there's like there's still remnants.
yeah, they're
Still
still
the
there
old
practicing.
Spanish remnants. Yeah, that's fascinating.
They
There's
do
If I
the
find that documentary, if I find it's a National Geographic documentary, if I find it, I'll send it to you. I
the
think you'd
group
find it really interesting.
The group I'm talking about still does like simulations of like the crucifixion where they do a self crucifixion where they're carrying a cross and I can't, Pentanites maybe the Pentadenites, I can't remember exactly, but anyways that area is preserved in time. There's so many villages that really haven't changed much in the last couple hundred years out there, other than electricity and maybe some modifications to some buildings.
Gotcha. Right. So I mean, there's a lot. Like we barely scratched the surface. We're about 40 minutes. I mean, there's a lot more. So people can actually watch your videos and the book at this and kind of follow along with the videos, right?
Yeah, for sure. Just follow along. I post all kinds of stuff. Sometimes I'll focus on episodes that are very specific, like Viking runestones in Oklahoma and Minnesota. Sometimes I'll post an episode of me just hiking out in the desert to some petroglyphs, just the raw footage of it. It's just for fun for me. And, I try not to take this too seriously because I'm just having fun. And I really like it's a way to use a creative outlet while I travel.
Right.
Um,
That's cool. You
yeah,
can see there's a lot. There's a lot more history. Even that thing that you showed, like I passed through Barstow to Vegas before so many times. I've driven right by that place you mentioned, and I've now it makes me want to stop there. So people need to check out your book. The place that I was talking to you about that you might find interesting is called Non Madol or Nan Madol. It's like this weird thing. It's like built. This is where is that? It's like in Papua New Guinea into something, but it's
oh,
like it's a temple complex. It's really
oh,
crazy. You got to see pictures of
like
this.
those little square islands.
Yeah, like it's somebody. There was a whole civilization here. They found like they just recently found it. Is my understanding. It's called NANMADOL, but
All
it
right,
just shows like there's so much. The real history is much different. But
yeah.
where can people find Enigmatic North America?
You can find it on Amazon. If you just type in Enigmatic North America, that'll probably help. That'll probably pull it up, but then you can add legends, oddities, and controversial history. And you're going to see two different listings on there. There's an ebook listing and there's a paperback listing. The paperback, is 8 by 5 by 8 by 5. You can hold it. It's a coffee table style book. It's my first book ever.
Yeah, and you're
I
holding it right here for people on YouTube or Rockfin. You can see him holding it. So a lot
Yeah,
of great visuals. Yeah.
that's out at Chimney Rock, Colorado. That's actually my favorite chapter that I feel like gets overlooked a little bit. But yeah, so it's on Amazon, and then I myself am on Facebook. I post these little 1 minute videos on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. All my tags are at Incred History when I do that. So at Incred History, and I'm incrediblehistory.com. I just have links to my little Amazon and links to this YouTube. I haven't really done anything with the website yet. So,
Gotcha. Well, great book, really interesting. Thanks for sharing.
yeah.
And people can reach out to you on social media too. So I'll put those links to your social media on that again. But again, great book. Title is Enigmatic North America: Legends, Oddities, and Controversial History, with author William Brown. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, see you there.